Okay. Now, under ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act, and during the Obama administration, there was a big push for a lot of, let's say, the science at the time was saying that specific learning disabilities, for example, could be better served in the response to intervention environment than as pullout. And I'm on the fence about that, but more money was sort of concentrated in that area to bolster and beef up response intervention as sort of the mechanism to address these reading issues. Now, fast forward, because this is our second administration since the Obama administration, and as far as the push, the science is sort of telling us now that we need pull-out services and we need peer-reviewed, scientifically based programs. There's been a big hard push for more recognition and expanded instruction specific for dyslexia, for example, pushed into the schools since the Obama administration. So that's another collision that we're having to deal with. But specific learning disability, and I'm bringing that up because it has something to do with how they structure reading intervention type services, okay? So whether your son's autistic or whether he's dyslexic, there's going to be a lot of similarities, frankly, that I foresee just because of my experience and how I deal with this kind of stuff, that I foresee there being issues that you're going to have to deal with specifically right around the third or fourth grade level, because this is when a lot of the deficits for autistics, high functioning autistics, end up really coming out. And that is in the area of comprehension, written expression, things of that nature, because it ends up colliding with some of these deficits that he's receiving services for, specifically in the area of language. So if he has pragmatic language deficits now, those things really should be the focus, because the communicative abilities, the stronger grasp of language and communication a child has, then some of these other issues related to reading, written expression, comprehension, fluency, those kind of things end up balancing out, okay? So you have to hit it from that two prong. The other one is visualization. That is another area where we tend to have some major issues for our kids when it comes to reading, not necessarily how fast you can read, but with regards to reading correctly, reading fluently, reading to learn, okay? And so that is that collision between visualization and language, okay? Because we have to visualize what it is that we are hearing. And that's where there is no reading center in the brain, guys. It is a collision of those two factors that then produce our competence and our ability to understand what we're reading and then be able to apply it in our learning, okay? And so with some kids, it's purely a language issue, and others, it is a language and visualization issue. And with some kids, they have a strong sense of language and they have a visualization problem. So it's sort of nailing that down and narrowing it down. A lot of our reading teachers, reading specialists, whatever you want to call them within our schools, have not been trained to the point they need to really understand the connection between those things and how to attack that. And so a lot of the problems are with the individuals, instructors, and not necessarily with the child. All right, this is also where we're having some major problems across this country with regards to the harm that the pandemic had. And most of our kids, with regards to now the statistics coming out, have been academically injured by the decisions and the learning loss that occurred during the pandemic, okay? And that has nothing to do with disabilities. So you can imagine if it impacted all kids across demographics, then at that point, factor in the fact that your child has a disability, your child also qualified for an IEP, and there you have it. What do you do about it? That's where I brought up specific learning disability. Where are those services concentrated? Because having more pull-out time in the form of, let's say, reading, isn't necessarily going to correct the issue. Because what you need is you need a competent educator in the form of a special education teacher and most of them have not been trained sufficiently to address our the very real issues that exist in reading. Like I said, the visualization and the language. And so depending on how all of that lines up, some of the families, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, some of you guys, you're better suited to solve the problem yourself or go in there and make changes within your state to where some of the issues that are an obstacle to providing the right kinds of reading instruction to our children are removed, meaning that they just mindlessly stick kids in, let's say, a ninth grade English class when they're performing at a third, fourth grade reading level. Because the interpretation by the state is that they've got to be immersed in their grade level content in order to advance and pass and get the credit in order to get their diploma. And so you sit there and you go, how in the hell can a kid at a third or fourth grade reading level end up fulfilling the requirements for a ninth grade English class? They do it all the time, and it's a mystery, isn't it? When in reality, their true grade level equivalency is far lower than that. Most of them are over accommodated to that level of success and then passed on to become somebody else's problem at a junior college or wherever the child ends up in their later life. So we're not really addressing the problem. And you sit there and you go, well, James, you're not providing any cool sort of real world advice. I am. And the realistic aspect is that I don't expect people that don't have the skills to magically have the skills just because they have a title. Okay? And that goes for a reading person, that goes for a special education teacher, that goes for an English teacher. All right? They don't necessarily have the qualifications, the expertise to attack your child's specific deficits. And for me to sit there and tell you that they do would be me lying to you. I deal with this all the time. And I'm not seeing kids make tangible, measurable progress in these areas. Why? Because the people that are charged with filling those voids and filling those fundamental gaps simply don't have the expertise to be able to do it. And then because of the pandemic, they pushed so much technology into the schools because that's where all this money was spent. And this is where some of these companies, these fly-by-night companies, and even these well-known companies ended up creating web-based programs, and then people have become over-reliant on that, especially educators. And educators that do not feel confident in filling those voids and those gaps in fundamental reading areas like fluency and comprehension, guys, they're going to push you in front of a computer that they've been lied to and told will remediate these issues. And that's self-directed learning for the child. And a lot of these web-based products just aren't doing it. And so we're not improving the knowledge of our teachers to in-person instruct and in-person correct these problems to where the child is mastering and able to move on. So this is where we're stuck. And this is where the reality must seep into all of you, that I don't blame the teachers. All right, our university systems do a crappy job at preparing them for these very real reading comprehension issues. Okay, and if they did not get those fundamental skills between kindergarten and third grade, a fifth grade English teacher or English language teacher does not know how to go back and fundamentally, most of them, fundamentally fill those voids. It is expected that they already are competent between those 3-4 grade levels, kindergarten to third grade. And this holds true the higher your child advances. And this includes your special educators. Guys, I'm a lawyer. They're teachers. I have a law degree. I could do any kind of law that I want to. But at the same time, ethically, I am bound to tell you that I can only ethically represent you in the areas where I'm competent. I am an expert in special education and 504 law. I am not an expert in tax law. I am not an expert in real estate law. I am not competent in these areas. But at the same time, we send our children to school and we make these assumptions that the individuals that are there because they hold the title of teacher somehow can fill these voids and these deficits in our children when they can't, because they are not competent in these areas. They're competent in the areas that they have chosen to teach. But yet most of them feel like they're under immense pressure, mainly from administration, to snow job you guys. Instead of come out and say, I'm not that comfortable filling these voids. And it's including that reading specialist. Just because you have a title reading specialist doesn't necessarily make you a specialist in reading or any other subject. Schools are real loose about handing out titles to people, guys. Doesn't necessarily equate to a true expertise and competence. The quicker that we're able to sit there and rub the fantasy away from our eyes and come to a realistic understanding that we got some major problems in public education with regards to the level of competency, with the amount of problems that we have, with the amount of deficit that we have in our students, some of it contributed by the pandemic and the learning loss there. The sooner we can sit there and correct and come back and redefine education and what that means. But we're still working off of a 19th and 20th century education model in a 21st century world. That needs to be changed. And so, yes, my recommendation for many parents is go out and educate yourself. Go out and find the people that can do it. Pool your resources with other parents that are having similar type of issues so that you can do small group tutoring for your children using the right professionals, a dyslexic therapist, a certified academic language therapist, a CALT, depending on where your child's deficits are in these areas. You sit there and say, well, the school has a responsibility. The school does have a responsibility. But guys, they're not doing it. And so sometimes you have to solve your own problem while you're fighting the school and advocating for your child. You have to do both. I have done that for my own children. I am not recommending or advocating you don't do anything different than what I and my wife do for our own children. When we see a problem, we will fill it while trying to solve the greater community problem, the greater societal problem. But I don't let my children languish because I am unrealistic about what I'm dealing with on the public school realm. This goes from the issue of behavior, from the issue of academics, from the issue of language, okay? We got some major problems, major deficits. We don't have enough competent professionals out there. We have competent professionals, but they're focused in what they have an expertise in. Let them be experts in those areas. But we need to have some more honesty, and we need to have some more transparency and clarity that you're not getting the full magnitude and the truth when you're sitting in these meetings as to what can be done and who's competent to do it. But if you're not seeing tangible, measurable progress in your child, then eureka, there you go. And the problem isn't your child.